Hello, friends. Welcome again to another episode of Conservation Stories. I'm your host, Tillary Timmons-Sims, and I have with me today Mr. Tom Sale. This is going to be a fun podcast. So,
thank you, Tillary.
I know Tom through a couple of different ways, and I'm not really sure which one necessarily the most. But Tom...
We're both High Plains drifters.
There you go. There you go. I drifted all the way from Brownfield to Earth and then back to Lubbock. That's what you call moving far away from home.
I love it.
Yeah. So Tom is you're a lobbyist.
Yeah.
Well, that's a scary word.
One of the most reviled professions.
I will say,
in America.
I spent some hours in Austin representing, trying to get a bill passed. So I'm not a registered lobbyist or anything. I probably said more times, people are lying than I've ever said in my life. Like I was like, to my face, to other people's faces, like how I don't get this,
That's sad. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you are like, you need to be working with these people. I'm like, long term, how do you do that? How do you have relationships with people that, I don't understand that.
Well, I'm happy to say I'm a lobbyist who sleeps well at night. We took a kind of an oath when we were starting our business, Larry Combest and myself. Of course, Larry represented the 19th District of Texas. He's a politician, also not a highly favored profession these days, sadly. It's honorable work, though. It's noble work. And we just took a pledge to say we're never going to take on a client or a cause we don't believe in our heart of hearts is in the best interest of all Americans in our nation. Mm-hmm. And we have the privilege of representing a lot of farmers and ranchers and related kind of agribusinesses, but small enterprises, these kind of ground up enterprises that try and do a great job with our land and water resources to do the very important work of producing food and fiber for the world, for the people of this world. So we love the work and have really been able to carve out a great niche all in Washington, D.C. on the federal side. I don't really do a lot of work at the state level, but federal, ag policy is mostly occupied by our federal government and has been since the beginning of our nation. So it's a real honor and privilege. And hopefully maybe one listener, maybe just one, will have a little better view of lobbyists by the time we conclude.
Well, one of the ways that we connected was in hemp, which is like the worst industry that has ever hit, with the exception of probably marijuana. But it is because of marijuana that it is so bad. Hemp is so bad, and it's a challenge. But I don't know how many times I've said, when we get to the place when someone like Tom Sale can do something, we're going to get somewhere. But right now, we're not getting anywhere. So anyway, but I appreciate the conversation that we had during that time was super helpful and just, candid about where that industry was and how people were viewing it, and so it's interesting because it is economically coming back around. We got a few folks that are making some money again.
That's good.
And so anyway, you never know.
Yeah, it is. It's hard, and it's hard blending, kind of what our laws will allow.
Oh my goodness. But
then also business is an entirely different challenge. And sometimes something can make a lot of sense on paper, but unless you have, this is human nature, is just kind of stick with what you know. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to create some real shifts and changes. But look, we're a nation that's been built by folks who build better mousetraps.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And we kind of have now had this conversation of the importance of slowing down and maybe some of the negative consequences of being so industrialized and so efficient. But also how my favorite place is the middle. But I, for many years was told that's where the dead skunks and the yellow stripes are. But I find it's probably actually where the truth is because it's the hardest place to get to, and not throwing out like one type of what people think of maybe as quote unquote an industrial agriculture, versus maybe a more local distribution of, agriculture. So you really kind of you represent those, our big commodities.
Yeah, it's a big issue, even right now in Washington, D.C. Secretary Vilsack, our current Secretary of Agriculture, has made really a point in his current administration. Of course, he served for 8 years under President Obama, and he served the last 3.5 under President Biden. And he said this time around that he really wanted to change the focus of USDA to do two things. One, address climate change, and two, to kind of lift up what he would call the underserved kind of farmers or the looked over farmers. I think he's done that. He's gone too far in that. You know, we have in our nation really 150,000 farm families that produce 90% of the goods.
Right.
And that supports the infrastructure. That also creates niches for others. And I'll be the first to argue. You gotta take care of the big picture items. Like, we are very blessed in this nation to have a food and fiber supply that is the least expensive for our consumer public, our 330 million population in the U.S.
Right.
and we export to the world, but we provide a food supply that, as a percentage of a person's daily income or time, is the lowest cost food supply.
Well, and I would like to add, when people are now like going to the grocery store and it's expensive, it is not because the farmer is making any more money.
That's right. It's all, we always talk about, like, in a loaf of bread, you might have, a nickel worth of wheat in that. The rest is packaging and processing and all that goes into that. So when people talk about this kind of industrial food system, that really is kind of off of the farmers. When you look at the landscape of America, it is dominated by family enterprises.
That's right.
They're trying to do a great work. They're trying to pass on that land better than it was passed to them, to the next generation of farmers. So they really do care for the land and the resources. They don't do it perfectly. It's a fallen world, but look, they've done an amazing job, and we have a highly productive agricultural sector. We also have an economy that allows for a lot of creativity.
Right.
And it's been really exciting for me to see some of the people that are finding niches. And, as we know more about health and we know about more about what we're consuming, there will continue to be those niches. I have a lot of great friends in the organic production side, and I'm tickled for them. And I think it's so cool, and I love the way they care for their land.
Yes.
What I get uncomfortable with is when they try and market their product to the exclusion of others, i.e. saying big agriculture is bad. I love it when they go and market their products as like, we're trying to produce something better, and you can know me, you can know where it was produced, where it's from. That kind of stuff to me is just very exciting and very cool.
Well, and that is part of our capitalist society, though. Is like what I have is better than what you have. I want to sell it to you.
That's true.
So I mean, I'm like, but
that is the nature of marketing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of how it works. Trying to move people to your side. And I grew up very, conventional and on a conventional farm, and then we farmed conventionally until we couldn't farm anymore. Yeah. And I have a lot of thoughts now that I've gotten older about, some of that, and what do I think of, some of the unintended consequences, but I also know that, two things are true at the same time. One is that there's people that would have gone hungry, would go hungry. Yeah. And also that we could do better, but we don't have to get rid of one for the sake of the other. We can have a local niche, and COVID showed us, we need to make sure that we're still able to access food without it having to come from Mexico or wherever. Yeah. But we also need the other side of that too. And a lot of times what we could get locally, we're privileged if we can get that, because that means we have the time to cook something that's not processed, and we have the money to pay for something that's going to be more expensive. So we have to remember that, it's got to be something that's food needs to be accessible to everyone. And part of the way that happens is through the farm bill, which we probably should call it the food bill maybe, because
good
so
name
much
for
of it goes.
You bet. Yeah.
So a lot of people, I think, in ag, everybody's wondering about, the farm bill. There's a lot of rumors going around, like heard yesterday, that this is the same farm bill that we had in the Depression. It hasn't been changed. Might be some exaggerations to that. But
definitely.
But so the farm bill, give us a little history on the farm bill, and why would somebody that just goes to Walmart and buys their groceries care about the farm bill?
That's a great question, Tillary. Thanks for that. That's a great setup too. Yeah, let me start here. We have, from the beginning of our nation, had a policy of trying to get people rooted to the land and creating commerce from that land that then they'll build, hospitals and churches and schools and everything. And that has worked amazingly well. And really, even the roots of that, it was revolutionary at the time, right? Guys like Thomas Jefferson writing lengthy, treatises on how a citizenship that is rooted to the land would be a better place to foster this kind of democratic experiment that we were getting into. In a lot of ways, it was a rejection of the European model, which was kind of this landed gentry, right? The lords and the people of means and wealth who would basically say, oh, ordinary citizens, they don't have the resources, they don't have the wherewithal to manage like an agricultural enterprise, to manage the land. And we as America kind of rejected that. We said, no, we're going to let ordinary people populate and tend to that land. We had great things like the Homestead Act that planted thousands and thousands of families out across rural America. And it has, the democratic experiment has blossomed from that. In the, what we think of as kind of modern farm policy, this it was enacted in the 30s, post-mechanical revolution, when a lot of things changed, right? So what the land that one man could cover prior to the mechanical revolution was 1/10 of the land that one man could cover afterward. Right. So you had this massive shift. When even looking at pre-World War I, like 50% of nations' families were on farms.
Right.
Now we have 1.9 million farmers in total out of 330 million people, and only 150,000 produce 90% of the goods. So it's a tiny fraction.
Less than 1%, I think now. Aren't we down to about that?
Yeah, it's amazing. And sometimes, Tillary, to your earlier point, sometimes these independent entrepreneurial farm families that populate the heartland, they do feel like they're kind of at the end of a rope, or they kind of feel like they're serfs to the seed companies and the major kind of agribusiness manufacturers that process the food from their farm. And I get, and right now is one of those times. It's like, man,
I say that too. It feels like you're stuck in the middle.
Yeah,
it feels like almost like
we're the skunks.
Sharecropping. We're the skunks. We're the dead skunks from the middle. Exactly.
Yeah, that's a tough thing. But this is fundamentally why we have a farm bill, is to keep those independent entrepreneurial family farms independent. There doesn't mean there aren't tough times like right now. I mean, we are in this incredible cost squeeze, right? The costs of production, be it land rents, be it labor, be it fertilizer and fuel and seed, and all the inputs have gone up dramatically. Really, post-COVID, kind of hit a peak in 2022, but many of the prices have remained sticky.
Yeah, they stayed.
Yeah, and now commodity prices over the last 2 years have declined, anywhere from 30 to 50%.
Right, and we're talking about, these are the same prices like when I was a girl. I think what it's hard for people to understand about farmers is that every year you risk it all.
I think that's so important to point out.
It's not. I'm taking a small risk every year.
Yeah, for that. And you don't have payday every 2 weeks or every month.
Yeah, exactly.
You have one crop that you're harvesting in a year. Now, you may diversify a little bit with some cattle or animals, or maybe you have some fall crops and spring crops, but it's all loaded into that crop that's in the ground. And this year is a year where most farmers are looking at it and saying this is going to produce a negative return on investment.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that kind of stuff would not fly on Wall Street. Thank God for the independent entrepreneurial family farms who built themselves for that, and they can weather it, but they need some help to stay independent.
Right. Well,
the Farm Bill in a lot of ways keeps them, rather than having to kind of sell out to bigger players, it keeps them kind of independent and on their feet. And that's why it's such an honor to get to work for those farm families. It's not perfect, and it's going to be a challenge this year. You asked about the Farm Bill, why it matters. That's one key component. It's a record of success. Our nation is richly blessed by these farmers who annually produce about $500 billion in new wealth. So,
and food security is national security.
Yeah,
we have to have it.
You got to have it. Yeah, there was an old chairman of the Ag Committee from South Texas, from the Rio Grande Valley, named Kika de la Garza. He used to always tell a story about interviewing the Secretary of Defense and talking about these high-powered nuclear submarines that can stay submerged for really as long as you want to stay submerged. And Kika de la Garza would always ask the question, how long can they stay submerged? And they would say, mechanically, forever. It's really almost limitless. And Kiko would kind of press the point. He was a great guy. He kind of had a raspy voice, and he'd say, "No, how long can they stay submerged?" And he'd just keep pressing the question until the Secretary of Defense would answer, "Well, until they run out of food." And Kiko would be like,
there you
that's
go.
it. We are absolutely essential."
Yes.
And he told a great story around that. But it is. So fundamentally, we take it for granted as Americans, right? We've never really known want. We've not known empty store shelves. We saw a little glimpse of that during COVID, but it was a tiny, and it was really more about toilet paper. It was less about
places,
food supplies.
Yes.
So we take it for granted. We shouldn't. We know that, but that's kind of human nature as well. And but it's why it's important that when we get something like a farm bill going across the floor of the House or the Senate, we try and muster all the strength just to help people understand why it's so fundamentally important.
Out here on the Texas plains, water is everything, and there's a resource that's as vital as it is fragile: our playa lakes. These lakes are nature's reservoir, catching rainwater to recharge our aquifer and provide lifelines for wildlife. But now they need our help. In collaboration with the Texas Playa Lakes Conservation Initiative and the Cargill Global Water Challenge, Sarah has started the Our Legacy is Tomorrow's Water initiative to inspire and work with landowners to restore and protect our playa lakes. Each playa we save helps secure a sustainable water future for the generations that will be coming after us. Whether it's improving soil health, restoring habitats, or recharging groundwater, we are committed to making a difference. Together, we can build a legacy that we can all be proud of. To learn how you can join in, visit the Playa Lakes Restoration Initiative page on the Sarah website. Let's keep Texas water flowing strong for the future. Visit sarah-conservation.com. The part that goes to the farm of the farm bill is a percentage of a percent.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like what percentage of the farm bill is now, and I will, let me just preface this by saying I have zero problem with food programs. And in fact, I probably fall on the other side. My friend Brandon Lips. Do you know Brandon?
Yeah, know Brandon well.
Brandon, he was undersecretary and food stamps was his thing, right? And he's like, it's the worst job because no one's ever happy. It's either not enough or it's too much.
Yeah.
So I probably fall on the side of like, let's do what we need to do.
Yeah.
Keep people from being hungry. I'm
compassionate in that way, for sure. I mean, we are a nation of wealth, and you hate to see anyone.
And it's actually not going to keep anybody from going hungry also. I mean, like, just, I've worked with several single moms trying to help them get on.
Now, these SNAP programs are, they've been a big part of our federal policy since the early 60s. Mm-hmm. And it's now grown to where 1 in 7 Americans are on food stamps, over 40 million Americans. To your question, it's more than 80% of the funds that are allocated in the Farm Bill. So over $100 billion a year goes into that food stamp program. On the other side, on the farm safety net kind of side of the Farm Bill, it's actually decreased. And I think it's important that listeners know this.
Yes.
When I was in Washington, D.C., and Larry Combest was chairman of the Ag Committee, we were working with a farm program that would annually obligate somewhere around $25 to $28 billion. Now the current baseline, and that was then, those were real numbers at that time. So talking nominal dollars, not inflation adjusted. These days we're dealing with a baseline in the ag safety net that is about $16 to $18 billion. So we've actually taken about a 20% decrease over that time. And it's kind of changed. It used to be more FSA-oriented Title I programs. Now the bulk of the baseline is in federal crop insurance, which is an incredible tool that really helps farmers kind of protect their risk and adopt technology. And it gives them a lot of flexibility as well in how they manage their operation. But there are times when crop insurance, and I'm a big advocate for it, but there are times like now when crop prices are so low that you're not able to purchase much protection because you don't want to over-insure, right? Because then there would be an incentive to not harvest the crop. So the guarantees that you can purchase in crop insurance are always tied to what the market's paying for crops. And right now, the market is just not paying much. And so that's when you need a strong Title I to kind of come in and say, look, these things are beyond the farmer's control. John F. Kennedy famously had a saying that the farmer is the only person in the economy who buys retail, sells wholesale, and pays the freight both ways. They're squeezed in this position, and right now they're selling world commodity markets. Oftentimes these commodities, whether cotton or corn or soybeans or peanuts or wheat, whatever it is, they're distorted by foreign governments.
Yeah, because now, really, since NAFTA, if I understand this right, like before NAFTA, we didn't really necessarily use ag as a tool for foreign.
Well, we've always been diplomacy. We've always been fairly altruistic. We've said, look, our nation is very blessed, and we're one of the wealthy nations of the world, and let's lead by example and have very low barriers to entry. That means foreign countries can sometimes manipulate and dump competitive products onto our market, and our farmers have to eat that, right? It's because of the actions of some foreign government. And we've also kind of lowered, that's been part of the reason why we've lowered our supports to U.S. farmers as part of what was called the Uruguay Round Agreement on Agriculture, part of the whole GATT process and the World Trade Organization. So, the independent entrepreneurial family farms are kind of competing in this world where our government wants to be altruistic. And the Farm Bill is kind of the one thing where we say, okay, farmers, we're going to stand by y'all because we know you compete in a marketplace that's more uncertain than other businesses, right? You get paid that one time a year. You're subject to the vagaries of weather throughout that year. And it's just particularly challenging for that reason. You have to pay input costs like fuel and fertilizer that you have no real control over, and they've gone up and they've been sticky. You have no control over the price that you sell at, or very little control, unless you're into some of these high-end kind of specialty markets. And we can talk more about that, and it's an exciting area. But for the bulk of the cotton or the corn or whatever it is, or the wheat, it just goes into those world commodity markets, and so you're the price taker. And that's where the Farm Bill comes in and stands by and says, okay, American farmer, we love you. We're going to stand by you through these difficult times until we get to better times. And that's what it's all about.
Well, and I think that, part of the confusion I think people have about, the large farmer is that the amount of land that people farm, it continues to have to increase because your net profit continues to go down. And so you are stuck in this cycle of having to get bigger, get out, unless you are. And I think you're right. It is exciting, I think, some of the niche markets that are coming available, and we'll see some of that. But I hope that people can understand, that farmers, they need that support. And even with the support, sometimes you can't make it, And that was our story. We did well for the first several years, and we were, it was great. I mean, we were looking at, hey, we're going to be able to make a living, and we might be able to build a house in 10 years. And then over the course of 7 years, year after year after year after year, we lost a little more net worth and a little more net worth, and until there's nothing left. Yeah,
it can turn on you quickly. And I know a lot of farm families are feeling that just right now. I mean, they're looking at this crop that's in the field. They're going to be bringing it in at a low value. They're looking at a lot of loss of capital this year, and they're wondering. It's why it's so important. And I want any listener to hear that we are working so hard to try and seize the moment and get this Farm Bill to completion, to fruition this fall. When Congress comes back after the elections in the lame duck session, I think we're set up to bring this baby home. I know how much so many farm families are relying on that, and we are working overtime to get it done.
I think without crop insurance, I don't know what we would have left here in our region. I just don't.
Yeah, and happily there are some. Look, the cattle side of the equation is pretty good right now. The dairy side is pretty good. There are some bright spots in the ag economy. But mainly for just your traditional kind of row crop farmers, really tough.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And, those folks are important. I wonder, where we are as we continue we will be out of water. I mean, it's not a question like, are we going to run out of water? It's like when we're out of water, what will happen in this area? How do you help people? Don't wait till then. Like, let's figure out something now, what I mean, that can help us diversify even, just into like, how do we do that? But I think that's something that needs to be considered in the Farm Bill is you have a whole region, 5 million acres within an hour of us, 5 million acres. You have a whole region that is completely, we're completely dependent on our rural neighbors. We are dependent on agriculture. And so it's not even just about, quote unquote, bailing people out, which is what I hear. Yeah. It's about, someone that has no connection with agriculture has probably no understanding of how their life will be impacted if we don't have some kind of help in transitioning or whatever we need. And I think part of that is what y'all are doing, which is advocating for, not just our area, because I know that you work for the Southwest Council of Agribusinesses, and that'd be great. I'd love to hear a little bit about them and their work. Let me go rewind just a minute.
You bet.
You have used the term Title I a couple of times, so you don't sound like Charlie Brown's school teacher. Can you explain to us what?
Yeah.
What do you mean by
sorry about that. That was very much Washington kind of insider speak. But the Farm Bill is made up of 12 different titles. Title I is your traditional kind of farm safety net. It basically is set up to say when international world cotton prices for this area that you are in, when world cotton prices are below a certain level that Congress has deemed as an adequate support level for producers, not guaranteeing a profit, but if it's below this, we're gonna generate some payments to help get farmers up to at least that level. And so that's what title is. It's a traditional farm safety net. So apologize for.
No, that's okay. And that's what people need to understand. Like, that's what keeps getting cut.
Yeah.
That's what keeps getting cut. And so there's less and less of that. And when people, if you don't like industrial, quote unquote, ag, if you don't like people farming a whole lot of land, then we need to figure out how to keep.
Yeah, we need a strong.
We need to change it so that people can actually stay on smaller acreage.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And look, there's always going to be change, and that's going to create some of these niche markets. Even, what you were talking about on the water. I'm probably not as dire as you, and part of my hope is just in the creativity of people. I mean, I kind of like. I was raised when George Herbert Walker Bush was running for president. He would talk about 1,000 points of light, right? The creativity of individuals throughout our economy who are finding better ways. So I know a lot of farmers around here now who are harvesting rain off their roofs and storing it. And the fact is, there's always going to be some amount of water. We're in a semi-arid climate for sure. We get on average 17 inches of rain a year, and some years that can be 2, and some years that can be 35.
Yep. Yeah, those are the people that we're talking to. We like to see those people, and what are they doing?
I know you do, and I want to encourage those people too, because it's going to take some of that real creativity. How to do more with less. That's one of the beautiful things of our culture, and it's what we as kind of West Texans.
I think so. We have taken the least of the least. And made something of it.
Yeah, I love it. This is hard land, but people have been creative and resilient, and my hope and my faith and my belief is they'll continue to be. Won't be everyone, and there'll be some that go out and get city jobs that like me that are in a lot of ways are easier, and they're
my gosh, absolutely.
Yeah, so
I agree.
But I love standing by those who are bringing the creativity to the table.
Absolutely.
And long suffering and working through the problems and getting to a better day.
I do too. And we love to champion those people, because a lot of times those are the people that people are like, they're crazy. But we have mutual friends, the Binghams.
Yeah.
And I just thought they were nuts. I mean, just what are you doing? Why are you doing something different? Because this has always worked, And now I love how when they started experimenting with hemp, I had someone tell me, we've all learned long enough. if they're trying something, we better watch.
Yeah.
And I just love that, and that's what I want. It's just like that sense of how do we look what our neighbors are doing, and let's all encourage them. Because, several years ago, there was a survey that was released that said the number one reason that farmers are reluctant to change practices is what will my neighbors think?
Yeah.
And the second is economics.
Yeah.
It really does speak to that sense of, we live in small places,
There is truth to that. I'm with you. I love the Binghams, and Cliff, I know, has told me the real motivation. And look, it's been hemp, wine, organic. They're into a lot of different things.
All kinds of things.
And really, his motivation in that was, how do I keep my kids on the farm? And he had a bunch of kids.
Yes, I did.
So it was like, how do we, instead of one family having revenue for one family on this, how do we increase the value of what we can produce on the land that we can support multiple families?
Yes, and I will tell you, like, Cliff has told me they went from conventional farming, 2,000 acres. They've never changed. They've always kept that 2,000 acres, okay? Conventional farming and putting into the local economy just through wages, like 150,000, and then it went up through organics to like 250,000. Yeah. Now they have a 2,000 acre farm, and they're at 1.25 million, and that is what one single family is putting into the economy of Texas just in wages. Like I want people to think about, and the impact of a diversified. A diversified farm, it's something to that.
Taking risks, and it's blood, sweat, and tears, and it's reputational risk, and all that stuff. Going out on a limb, but kudos to them for doing it, and not that look, it's challenging. I mean, look what's happened to the wine markets post COVID.
Right now,
as that
exactly
kind of market has people start drinking way too much wine, and they got moved to other stuff. So it's these markets are so difficult. You figure something out, you get it going, but then there are difficult times to go through, soldier through. That is the story of agriculture.
It is, it is.
That's why I love these people, and I love getting to represent them in Washington, D.C. I think they're a real jewel, they're a real treasure for our nation, and so it's a real honor to get to speak on that.
And not everybody believes the same, and not everybody, I've had people say, farmers are the best environmentalists. I'm like, not all of them. Yeah. Because we're just people.
Yeah.
And some people absolutely are, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm confident. And one of the other challenges we always face is, there are folks who, particularly in Washington, D.C., where I do a lot of work, who tend to, analyze things on paper.
Yes.
And say, well, this ought to be easy. So we ought to just kind of enforce this change. And those people really need to get out of Washington, D.C. Dwight Eisenhower actually had a kind of a fun saying on this. He would just say, it's mighty easy to farm when your plow is a pencil and your field is a piece of paper.
Yeah.
They think they kind of know best, and what can we do?
Right.
This kind of true conservation doesn't happen best when it's kind of forced on you out of Washington, D.C. It's the creativity of the people who are actually attached to the land. It's empowering them with information and sometimes with resources. Because sometimes the best conservation doesn't yield the best return on investment.
No, exactly.
Right?
That's true.
And so that's why we have some of these conservation programs. This is Title II. Started getting nerdy on you again. Title II of the Farm Bill is all about how do we come by farmers and help equip them with tools to not only adopt technology, but make the natural resources go longer, build into the soil instead of extract from.
That was the point of these conservation programs is for them to be locally led and grassroots, and I think over time, I will say, Lacey and I traveled to a lot of different states, and what we see happening, we still see a lot of that farmer-led initiative in ideas in conservation and participating in conservation like maybe I would think that it used to be. When my granddad, I've got newspaper clipping of my granddad, and he was one of the first to win, a conservation award. And it's so interesting because it's the same talking points here now. He had some grass-raised pork, and he was turning marginal land back into grassland and, converting, and doing some different crops and those kind of things. And, it's it was like today. I mean, it is so strange, you know what I mean? Because we call them climate smart, quote unquote, farming, but it's nothing different than like what actually he was doing in the 50s.
Yeah,
and
that's
the
true.
same organizations were doing, you know. But I see, you know, it's been really encouraging to see those systems and agencies that were in place be really, really impactful in those rural communities, like in Oklahoma and Arkansas.
Yeah.
And I mean, we have learned that Texas, we've been kind of humbled, let me just say. You know, it's easy to be like, hey, we are from Texas. And also, like, look what we did. We live in a place where people said you cannot live. And we have lived here for generations, you know, and then we go other places and like, oh my. We should just, like, as my brother says, sit back and listen.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah, listening, learning is huge. I
is.
love your reference here. I think it was Captain Randolph B. Marcy who first came upon the Llano Escato and said this will be a place that no man will ever permanently reside.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I
He
remember.
was such a pansy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Maybe he couldn't
exactly.
hack it, but our forefathers did.
Yeah, so my great-granddad is like, they called him Peanut Wagner. He was the first to grow peanuts up on the plains.
Yeah.
And, oh yes, their family just, you will freeze, you will starve, you will die up there.
Yeah.
Sometimes I actually think they might have been onto something.
Yeah.
But we're like, oh, we can't do something? That's the exact thing we're going to do.
But this land out here is amazingly rich. You know, the soils produce great grass for growing cattle.
Oh my goodness,
You know,
yes, for so many years.
It's awesome how we've cultivated this and built really stable, good, strong, growing communities here on the high plains of Texas. And it's an area I'm really proud to be from. 5th generation West Texan.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. You know, and it's just, even the older I get, the more value I place on, you know, the things that I just, in my culture, I think probably a preacher you probably have heard of, Tim Keller.
Yeah.
He talks about, you know, I think he was quoting Malcolm Muggeridge talking about how for a man to understand his culture, he has to leave it. You know, and I think about that sometimes, how the internet has brought that ability for us to kind of leave, you know. And then I personally feel like I have the responsibility to say, hey, this is a fabulous thing. This is our strength. This is our coordinating weakness. Yeah. And we can't mess with one without messing with the other. So how do we help people really push into the things that we are really good at?
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I love Tim Keller. Great PCA pastor from New York.
He is. He was. Great man.
Yeah,
so, okay, Southwest Council of Agribusiness.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah.
And what do we need to know about it? What are they doing?
Yeah, thanks for that. So Combest, our firm is a multi-client firm. We have clients all over the nation, really in this agricultural space. But in 2007, Southwest Council was kind of built up and around us, and trying to give voice to really the alliance of crop growers and the businesses that support them or that they support. So it was really started by some of the lenders from the area, as well as some of the implement dealers, John Deere and Case IH implement dealers, who said, look, this farm bill isn't just important to the farmers. And we're tired of seeing farmers get vilified as kind of welfare queens. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, farming is, you know, it for an independent family, it may be that you're losing $100 an acre and you're covering a couple thousand to 5,000 acres. And so when these support payments come out, they can be big numbers now.
Right.
And people are like, well, gosh, that person got $150,000 from the federal government. That's more than the average income of any family. The family average per capita income maybe $60,000 or $70,000. How does that make sense? And the way it makes sense is because this is actually it's a business infusion into an enterprise that is spending maybe $700, $800 per acre on that ground.
Exactly.
Maybe losing in a particular year $100 or $200 an acre, and so they're trying to make up a part of that, and just so it can add up, and that leads to groups like the Environmental Working Group, which is kind of made a living. They don't actually have anything at risk, but they're a public interest group in Washington D.C. that has really feathered their own nest by trying to vilify farmers and say, "Oh, this Tillary Sims, she got
X amount of dollars, yes,
$2 million over the past 40 years from the government." It sounds really big, and so they've kind of made a living off of this discontent. these guys in Southwest Council, guys and gals, said, we're tired of seeing our farmers vilified in this way, and we need to be engaged in this fight for them. And so the Southwest Council was formed in that way. It's kind of got a unique structure, like individual farmers aren't members, but they're organizations like Plains Cotton Growers or the Texas Corn Producers.
Yes.
And it's a 5-state kind of regional organization. So all the commodity growers and then a lot of the banks and businesses that support them or that they support that say, yeah, we see the value in this farm bill and we want to be engaged in this fight too. So it's a really unique, fun organization. We've been very honored to get to work with that group for going on almost 20 years now.
Yeah, I of course I grew up. Combest was, in office all my growing up years. Something that's just like a household name.
Such a good man. Yeah,
and so appreciate all that he's done for our region. Through the years, and that's it's an interesting thought. Tell me how you think. What's the best way to support? Like, what is the best thing the Farm Bill can do? Like, if you could just say, hey, this is common sense. I know all these families, and I know how their businesses are running. This is what needs to happen.
Yeah.
Is it just enough to be more than just enough to cover half of what? Now I have enough money to pay back half of what I owe, right? Or, for people to understand, like, when you farm, the cost is so expensive that you are taking out an operating note. This is I would say 99% of farmers.
Yep.
And we're talking about $1 million easy a year.
Yep.
And that
more than most people will borrow in a lifetime.
In a lifetime. And that is not, they are living on that. I mean, that is what they are putting into seed and fuel and all of the labor and all of these things. So, I mean, that's the kind of thing we're talking about. So when you talk about someone getting $100 an acre check in a payment from the government over 2,000 acres, seems like a lot, like you're saying, but it's not. Is it more of that, like be shoring that up so that it can be more than just what is, cents on the dollar?
Yeah. Modernizing that to our current cost of production is really important. And that when you try and really boil down what the current chairman of the House Agriculture Committee in Washington, D.C., who's kind of gone out on a limb to support farmers, that's essentially what his bill does. It says, look, the last time we updated these reference prices was in 2014. We've had 10 years of massive inflation on the cost side. Some of that's been made up for by gains in productivity. That's been the beauty of the American farmer, but not all of it. And so there's red ink out there. We need to update these support prices to where we say if it goes below this amount, again, which is not necessarily a profitable amount, but if it goes below this amount, we're gonna throw out some support to stand by these farmers. That's essentially what they're doing. And I think that is, you also have to, in dealing with policy in Washington, D.C., you also have to ask what is implementable, right? So we have this great network of county FSA offices, that's the Farm Service Agency around our nation. And what is something that they can actually do that provides that kind of base level of support? You're not going to take away the need for creativity and increases in productivity and the farmers figuring things out. Right. We need that. We need a system that doesn't make farmers numb to the signals of the market. Right. We don't want to just say keep on doing what you've been doing forever.
Right.
We wouldn't want that as a nation. They have to be dynamic. They have to look and be creative. But there needs to be that base level of support that gives them the flexibility to make that kind of slow growth and change, to diversify maybe. Maybe it is bringing livestock into the operation, or maybe it is transitioning to something like organic, or maybe it is in some cases getting bigger and just being able to manage and spread those costs across more acres and be highly productive. All those things are good things, but we've got to have that. You want a level of support that allows farmers to make those decisions on their own with some level of security.
And I think a good way to think about, think about Maslow's, needs,
hierarchy of needs.
Like in one way to think about it is like, I think if you could take a family farm and give them a foundation that's like, we so value what you do.
Yeah.
We want to eat.
Yeah.
So we're going to keep you there. Okay, trick question. Is there a way? Okay, let me preface by this. I just read this last week, Kroger
Yeah.
Record profits. I think $41 billion in last quarter. The most they've ever made. Their CEO makes like 517 times what the local cashier makes. Okay, so now we're talking about the end of the supply chain. Is there a way to create policy that makes it where farmers get paid at least what they're putting in on their crop? Because a lot of these commodities, you're not even, the price of the commodity doesn't even cover the cost of producing that commodity.
Yeah.
And they're being sold to big corporations. Those folks, I don't think they're losing money. So without like saying, do away with capitalism, because I'm a capitalist, but I also believe people are not always good. And that means corporations also are broken, fallen, however you want to say that.
Yeah. I'll be the first to say greed is not good, but attempts at bureaucracies trying to govern that never have worked out well. The belief, my faith has to be in the marketplace, that if there's an area that's being overcompensated, that's going to drive competition for someone to come and get a piece of that action. That's the belief in the market. And I believe over time in history, the market tends to solve those problems better than some dictate from the government. It's my opinion. I'm a conservative guy and patient to kind of let some of those things work.
Right.
This is even coming in our current presidential debate where candidate Harris, Vice President Harris, has talked about this kind of trying to manipulate or have the government control how much profits can be taken at various segments of the economy.
Well, I know we have laws, that have impacted on like Microsoft and other corporations that are, well, in fact, I think that the Kroger-Albertsons issue, which, they were going to merge, and I don't think it's happened. And part of that is because they're like, you're going to be so big that there's not going to be competition.
Yeah, it's been an antitrust review.
Yeah, it works in the reverse. So, and I know we just don't have a lot of, I think I don't know, but I think I wonder, to your point earlier about what's developing in these niche markets, if that's kind of what we're seeing.
Well, it's a way that farmers can get more of the value of what they produce. I mean, I know some farmers that are marketing in a local kind of market called the Merc, Dr. Ben Edwards, and it's really cool that they're taking it from the farm, selling it there. There'll be less
Frontier Market on the square in Plainview.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have mentioned one because there are a lot of people doing this, and I get really excited about that kind of stuff. And it is a way that in that competitive market environment where someone sees, gosh, someone else is getting all the action off of this. Maybe I could get a piece of that action. And they're actually producing a very high quality product. They're taking a great deal of pride in what they produce because they know their name is attached to it.
Right.
And I love that they're being rewarded for that. And
I do too.
To the consumers out there, if you're going to buy Velveeta or you're going to buy some cheese from a local market, I'd say go buy the cheese from a local market.
Exactly. Well, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I think we could go another hour or so because I have like a million other questions. But
we'll have to do it another time. Thanks for the opportunity, Tillary.
Let's do. Thanks, friends, for joining us again for another episode of Conservation Stories. And if you would please do us a favor, and you can do a favor for Tom. Tom, tell us the name of your podcast because he has a great ag podcast.
Yeah, it's Groundwork on Farm Policy Facts, which is a kind of a PR group that we work with in Washington, D.C., just to try and kind of bounce back against some of the negativity that's out there about agriculture. So, the Groundwork podcast on Farm Policy Facts. Thanks for that.
I like listening to it because I don't have to so often it's like everything's fear driven, and that's what gets people to listen or motivated. And so I like it because it's really facts driven. So thanks for being here. And so go follow, look at Groundwork, and then rate and review and share.
Follow all that.
Follow all of those things. Do all those things. You are donating to the cause when you do that.
Indeed.
So thank you.
Thanks,
Tom.
Adios.